Hi, and welcome to Three Questions, where I ask an esteemed guest to choose three questions out of five, and then we talk about stuff. And today I'm joined by Aeriale Johnson, who is the coordinator of curriculum in Ukiyavik, Alaska. I've known Ariel for a long time. She's taught in Alaska, Florida, California. Am I right about that? New York. Worked as
I was
a staff
consulting when I was in New York,
consulting
yes.
in New York. And the thing about Ariel is, along with her intelligence, uh, her commitment not just to academic growth and authentic reading and writing experiences, but also commitment to like her students as human beings that we see over and over and over again in your writing, in your teaching, and in your online presence. I'm so happy to be talking with you today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And you chose for your first question, what is your educator origin story? How'd you become a
Right.
teacher?
My life as an educator is actually rooted in my family. Um, I actually tried really hard not to be an educator. My mother was an educator, a speech therapist. My grandmother was an educator, a PE teacher for 36 years in Florida. My grandfather, I know, right? God bless her.
Bless,
Not
bless.
just PE, but middle school PE,
Oh,
right?
oh. I have
So,
only covered middle school PE classes, and it's an experience. It's an
right.
odor. I'll just say that. I'll just say that.
It's
There are
a odor.
odors. There are
Correct.
odors. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and then my grandfather, he was a teacher and a coach and ultimately an assistant principal. He passed away before I was even born, about a year before I was born. But anyway, my family is just full of educators. My great aunts, um, pretty much everyone. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
Also, I don't want to be poor, so I don't want to do that. And I went off to college. I started as a pharmacy major, and then I realized that didn't like really go with my personality and who I was and kind of where I wanted to be right in life. And so then I was a broadcast journalism major, and then I also decided that that wasn't right for me, and somehow I ended up in the major that I said I would never have. And so I started my career as a special educator. And I will say that that is a combination of my mother as a speech therapist and my grandmother, right, as an educator, kind of living inside of me. I really kind of realized what my origin was as an educator actually at my grandmother's funeral.
Hmm.
Um, she was 92 years old when she passed away, so she lived a long, beautiful life. And her students, who were retired teachers themselves, right, by then, because she was 92 years old, spoke at her funeral. And one of them said, Mrs. McKinney was a holistic teacher before holistic was a buzzword,
Wow.
right? Just talking about, so my grandmother, her high school principal said, if you go to college and get a degree in education, you come back, you've got a job. And I asked my grandmother when she was probably 89,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, I said, Grandma, why did you become a teacher?
Mhm.
And she said, Well, Ariel, back in my day as a Black Southern woman, I had two choices. I could be a teacher or I could clean up after white people. And so, I'm not cleaning up after anybody but myself, so, including you, right? So she said, so I chose to become a teacher, right? And so I guess it was probably at that point I started asking her lots of questions, right? About I was, a union president when I was in the classroom before, and
You
asking her, like, she's telling me the history of, because there was a whole separate union, right? A union for
Yeah.
Black educators, and then thinking about how she went through desegregation, and their schools didn't actually desegregate until my mother's senior year of high school.
She
So
was
it
in Florida. She was teaching in Florida.
yeah, yes, it was the 1969-70 school year. My mom was a senior in high school when they finally desegregated. And so my grandmother was actually one of the fortunate ones, right, who did not lose her job as a Black educator. She just moved over to the integrated school and everything was fine, but she was in her hometown, right? And it's a very small town. And so, of course, the pool of possible employees is going to be smaller there and that sort of thing. So it wasn't quite as difficult. I think that's one of the things that we don't talk about a lot. I think, if you're talking to Black teachers or wondering why there aren't any or very few of us, right, to talk to, like, how many origin stories are there for Black teachers? Like, the origin story of there not being Black teachers is, ironically, the desegregation of schools, right? So when schools desegregated, well, Black teachers didn't have anywhere to go because they didn't want them teaching white children. And so, all the time, people ask, like, why did you become a teacher and why don't more Black people become teachers? And it's like, we were there,
Yeah.
we were
You
present.
were teaching.
And the desegregation of schools, as wonderful as so many aspects of it were, was a very negative experience for Black teachers. And so, and you have to think at that time, when you think about my grandmother, my grandfather, like, smart, college educated Black people, that's all they could do, right? At that time, particularly in certain areas of the country, right? And so, um, the people who were educators and Black were just smart, right? They
Yeah.
were really bright people who could have been a million other things, right? And so that's what a lot of intelligent Black people are doing now, a million other things that pay better, that have a higher regard in society, that,
Are a better fit for the people
a
and their
better,
interests. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, right. All of those many, factors that you think of with that. So anyway, I guess, it's my family that's I became an educator because I come from educators, and as hard as I tried to not be an educator, I was not successful at that. And I'm really grateful for it. Every now and then I'm like, would I look good in red? Could I work at Target? But I would probably spend all of my money
You
at
could.
Target.
Aeriale
So
Johnson, you
yeah,
could
so I
once
guess
you want, you
I'll
would be
stick with this
you would
education
have
thing.
fun. Yeah. It also makes me think about, like, just your story is so generational, right? And so about, like, your family and the generations that came before you. And for so many people whose families weren't allowed to teach, they don't have that generational lead in to the profession, let
Right.
alone the experience that kids have, right? That it's like, well, why aren't people becoming teachers? It's like, well, they're not having a good experience in school. So why
Correct.
would they become why would they want to do that job? It was an positive experience for them.
Yes.
I have the same, I'm similar, obviously in different ways, but I also tried to avoid becoming a teacher. The two things I swore I wasn't going to be was a teacher or a writer. And here we
Oh,
are.
and you're both of those
Feels
things.
very Greek. Feels very like, yeah, feels very like weird curses. I see it more as a curse. It feels more
Right.
beautiful in your telling and your angle of it. For me, it's sort of like, I don't know, can't escape the grip of the teaching or something. Um, Beautiful. Okay, so wait though, what was it about teaching? So I hear the angle of the generations, but so you were in broadcast journalism and that wasn't working. So what made the flip? Was it kind of like, oh, maybe I'll check that out because my family did? Did you go into a school? Did you have a moment where you're like, I think this is for me? Was it more
I
like mine was more purpose driven at the time? I was kind of like, I don't know what else to do, to be
uh,
honest. And then I also went into a classroom and was like, this is important. Do you know what I mean? I just was like,
right.
I don't know if I'm good at it. I don't know if I even like kids yet. But I know what's happening here means something.
You
And that
know,
for me.
honestly, I I think it's multifaceted, but I think one of the things is, like, I've always been good with children, right?
Yeah.
I actually do like them. And so, I was the kind of person who like taught Sunday school
Mhm.
and babysat and, all the things involving kids. And I was very good with them all of the time. And I really do love them. It's funny, in my consulting, I remember being in a school upstate in New York, and I did a demo lesson, like, with a small group of kids. And, you plan it, and you, like, really are, like, meticulous about what you want teachers to get from what you're doing with kids and all of that. And so anyway, we finished, we're doing the debrief, and a teacher says, well, the thing that I really got from that lesson is that you love children. And I'm like, Well, I mean, I kind of am in this profession because I do love them. And so, like, I mean, I was glad that that's what she walked away with, right? Like, if you can demonstrate anything, let it be that to love the kids that are sitting in front of you, right? Um, but anyway, so I think it was a love for children, but also, I told you that I started out as a pharmacy major, but I tell you, like, there's a little story behind that, right? So, when I was in high school,
Mhm.
I wanted to be a pediatrician. Like I
Okay.
was the future doctors of America, like the whole thing.
Mhm.
Uh, Volunteered at a hospital, everything. I wanted to be a pediatrician. That's what I really wanted to do, which is kids, right?
Kids.
And then I had a teacher who told me, this was in high school, one of my science teachers. I won't say which science because then everybody who's from my hometown will know exactly who it was. But she told me that I could not be a doctor, that I was not smart enough to be a doctor, and that I should try pharmacy or something like that. Okay, first of all, you have to be really smart to be a pharmacist. But
You
anyway,
really do.
let's move on to
And
let's just
teacher.
move on
And
past
teacher.
the obvious,
And
right?
all of the fields, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm. Right. So she told me that I couldn't do it, right? That I wasn't smart enough. And I was a child, very impressionable, not very confident,
right.
right? In my abilities intellectually, or not very confident like in a social sense either. Just, I don't know, it's kind of nerdy. And I was like one of 8 black kids, right, in my high school, and so that was a factor too.
That's okay.
So anyway, she told me that I couldn't do it. She says,
Mhm.
you can't do it, you can't become a pediatrician. And I believed her. She's like, you need to be a pharmacist. And I was like, okay, I guess she's right. And
Right.
so I started as a pharmacy major. And then so, there's that like cycling back to kids, right? And like, what is it that I know? Of course you cling to it. So if my family had been doctors, then I would have clung to what I knew, right? And become a doctor or whatever. But it was, kind of a combination of clinging to what I know and also what I love. And then there was also, when I was in college, I think that the moment that I shifted, I took this class in exceptionalities. That was like a general class, not for education majors at all, but just a general social science class, right? For people to learn about the exceptionalities that people have. We had this phenomenal professor. And I mean, his class was full, like lecture
Yeah.
hall, completely
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
every single semester. He was
It's a
fantastic.
vibe. It's a vibe. That college professor,
Yeah,
if you're in, yeah.
yeah. I took that class and I was like, "Oh, I'm into this," right? And then I became a TA for him.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "I'm really into this." And
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't know this about me, but my major, my degree is in special education.
Yeah.
And so that was it, right? That was the like marriage of all
Yep.
of the different
Yep. All
factors. And
came
so I
together.
ended up majoring in special education. And I majored in learning disabilities, and then I minored in behavioral disorders.
Yep.
That's what we call those
I
things
know that.
inappropriately,
Mhm.
but that's what it says on the transcript or something. But
I
anyway,
gotta write
so
that out and put in the more current term.
right, so
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, it's all a kind of all of those factors of me shifting
That's
from
amazing.
one major
Yep.
to another, and eventually just kind of landing in special education. And I got to be honest, the paperwork in special ed is a total and complete nightmare. And that's why I left. I couldn't do it anymore.
Yep. The grind. I
So,
mean, that's the thing about teaching. It's like we love, especially when you love it. Do you know what I mean? The grind just gets you down.
right. Yeah. So after doing special ed for a while, I got certified to teach middle high school English.
Yep.
And so I was an English teacher. And then sometime in there, I moved to Alaska, and I initially taught special education, and then I was an English teacher, and then there was a need for elementary ed
Mhm.
teachers. And so I got certified
Look
to
at
teach elementary ed and
there it
started
is.
teaching elementary ed. And I kind of found my sweet spot here
Yeah.
in elementary ed. I was primary for a really long time, and I mean, in a lot of ways, it's my zone and I love it. But this year I'm with fourth graders and I'm kind of obsessed with them because they understand my sarcasm, right? They get my sense of humor, and they're not like as physically taxing as little
They've
kids are,
grown a
you know,
little bit. They've
and
grown a
like
little bit. Yeah.
yeah, I'm for real tired. So I'm like, I like the fact that I sit on the floor with them and I dance and
Yeah.
play tag and do the whole thing. But
Yep.
9 and 10-year-olds are just not as
Yeah.
physically exhausting
They
as
are.
5, 6, 7-year-olds are. So
No, and a little bit goes
right,
a long way, right? A little bit of dancing in 4th grade goes a long way, whereas, like, you have to
correct.
dance sort of all the time, in
With
2nd
first
grade. Like,
graders,
you just
oh
never stop
yeah,
dancing. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Okay,
exactly.
so
It's like
what is 2nd question, I love that origin story. I love the idea of the generations moving you and the history behind that, and then also this idea, like, I think there's something beautiful about like, Maggie knew she wanted to be my wife and partner, knew she wanted to be a teacher when she was in high school. Knew it, and from very young. And that's a path, right? But then there's also it's so
mhm.
interesting, so many of us, right? It was more like trial and error. Like, all right, I wanna not do that. I think
I
I
kind
think
of
I
not
wanna
be like the rest of my
I think I
family,
wanna not do that
right?
work, right? It seems hard and low paid. And then, yeah, you whittle around and you're like, "Oh, I think this is the only thing I'd be happy doing." It's wild.
Right. Absolutely. And honestly, I have to be honest, I've like tried to quit
Yeah.
like multiple times, like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Mm,
And whether it's doing something else in
yep,
education
yep,
or it's been, having a new job
yeah.
altogether. I tried that for well, I tried to try it for like a year, but it didn't actually work.
It didn't
So
actually.
I ended up uh, subbing
Mm,
for like I think I got like a couple months in and I was like, yeah, so I ended up subbing, which was actually very interesting and
and that's
cool.
kind of
And then I moved, and I was like taking a ton of classes then too. And then
sure.
I moved. It's at that point that I moved to Alaska. And I have
Right.
to say, Alaska probably saved my teaching career.
Yeah? Why do you say that?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of factors. I think that um, it saved my teaching career because I didn't have to be poor anymore. So there's that. I got on a plane and moved
Because
to Alaska.
Alaska paid more or because
Yeah.
got
I
it.
got I instantly got a $30,000 raise by moving to Alaska. Yeah, I know,
This
right?
is a good
And so,
PSA for moving to
I was
Alaska.
in Florida, so they were paying a
Right,
dollar,
right, right, right,
but
right.
I moved
They
to
were
Alaska,
taking money from you when you went into schools.
right?
Write me a check to have the honor to
Yeah,
teach.
exactly, basically.
Yeah.
So there's that, right? Because there are always things that I wanted to do,
Sure,
right? Like travel,
sure.
right?
No, and live a
Especially
life. And you should be able to live a life if you're gonna work, especially if you're gonna work the amount that you have to work to be a teacher. I mean, to be
right.
able to have
Exactly.
those joys of life feels
And in Florida, I was literally working like three jobs,
yeah,
right? I was teaching,
yeah,
I worked at Jacques Penney, JC
yeah.
Penney, and I was also the
I've
assistant
never heard that
manufacturer on the side, and like,
before.
girl,
Yeah.
it was like the worst, like literally three jobs. I moved to Alaska so then
No,
I
I
could have
know.
one job. And it was
I
really
know.
hard for me. My first year in Alaska, I taught summer school because I didn't know what to do during the summer if I didn't have a job. And then I
Yeah.
have summer school since then.
No.
Yeah. So it was the financial thing. But also, I think, in rural Alaska specifically, don't go teach in Anchorage and think this is going to happen because it's not. But in rural Alaska, it's like if you do your job
Yeah.
and you do it well, you're going to be left alone.
That's
And
beautiful.
a lot, that's been my experience. It may
Yep,
not be other people who've
yep.
taught in
We got
rural
it, we got
Alaska's
it. Yep, yep.
experience, but it's been my experience in rural Alaska that if you do your job and you do what you're supposed to be doing with children and families, in the
Yep.
community and those sorts of things, then everybody loves you and they
Beautiful.
will let you stay forever,
Beautiful.
and you don't have to, you know, do some of the things that I don't think are good for kids here. Um, and it also like it lends itself to um, being deeply invested in culturally responsive teaching without having
Mhm.
to fight for it every
Right.
single day,
Mhm.
right? Like I have taught in places where, I'm still going to be a culturally responsive
Mhm.
teacher, like California, where I
Mhm.
taught predominantly Mexican
Mhm.
students. And I walk into my classroom and they hand me a box of read alouds that I'm supposed to do with my kids throughout the year. Like they literally had one a week that they'd planned out for us. And
Wow.
one of them out of 30, one of them had Mexican people in it. And
I mean,
like
I
it
wish I
was
could even react. You see it so often that
5 of them
like,
had
well,
people of color in it, and
yeah,
4 of them were dead
yeah.
Black people,
Who lived
right?
hard lives of struggle. Again, you know what I
Right,
mean? Like, again,
right.
like, not about
Yeah,
suffering and
who were assassinated, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So anyway, and I used to always say, like, every day when I go to work, it's an act of subversion,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah,
I don't feel like that here. I
that's great.
don't feel like being a culturally responsive teacher is an act of subversion. I think it's applauded, it's celebrated, it's what they want and expect of you. And
Mm,
so that makes it a much easier fit for me as
that's
well.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Um, I have so many more questions, but I'm gonna move on just for sake of time. But I wanna know, like, why do you think that is? What do you think is different about Alaska? I'm going there. I can't help it. But what do you think is different about Alaska?
Well, I think in
Like
rural Alaska,
California, right? 'Cause you think like, "Oh, whatever, California is so whatever, liberal."
right.
Mhm.
Well, I think in rural
Rural
Alaska,
Alaska.
you are working in predominantly Alaska Native
Mhm.
communities who are not generationally as far um, out of their
Mhm.
traditional ways of living,
Got it.
right? So,
Yep,
subsistence
yep,
hunting and native dancing and
yep,
like all of those things, it's a thriving culture that's still very much practiced and present,
yep,
right? And all of those things here. And so the expectation is that you become a part of that,
yep,
that you
yep.
invest in that, and that you bring that into your classroom with you. Um,
It's almost like you're the other, not them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Correct.
you're the one coming into the culture, right? And so you need to be responsive to that kind of
Yes, absolutely. That is 100% the expectation, and obviously 100% what is best for children, what's best for their communities. And I think there's not the impetus to assimilate
mhm.
in rural Alaska because
Yeah,
we're off the road
yeah,
system, right? We're isolated. I have to get on a plane to leave here,
yeah,
and so we're so far removed
yeah.
from where you'd feel more inclined, required,
Mhm,
however you want to say it,
mhm.
to assimilate,
Yep,
right?
that makes a lot
And
of sense.
so there's just not there's not
Yep,
that
yep,
need here or impulse here per se. And so I think that's part of
yeah,
like why the culture is still thriving
yep.
is because of the isolation,
That makes a lot
right?
of sense.
Which
Yeah,
is really, yeah, it's really uh, beautiful. My students have been coming in for a few weeks now, like, oh, my crew got a whale because they're whaling
wow.
right now. And so, the kids are up late cutting
Yeah,
muktak,
yeah,
eating unalik, and, putting, they give the first of it to elders and then putting things away for the rest of the year. That is food that they will eat for the remainder of the year. And so, my students actively participate in those subsistence activities on a regular basis. And so, it's just it's beautiful, and I feel really grateful to be here and to be a part of this and to be a part of the culture and to, the word Anupiak means they're real people.
Mm.
And I 100% believe that that is true, right? I feel like they have influenced me
Yeah.
to be more of myself, be a better version of myself. I will say, I first moved to Alaska in 2005,
Hmm.
and I call it my quarter life crisis. I was like in my 20s,
Hmm.
and
Saturn returns, if you know astrology.
right, and I like that was the beginning of my decolonization process,
Mhm.
right, for myself
Mhm.
was here,
It's
right?
amazing. Yeah.
I was I was inspired. I was just I don't know, just kind of overwhelmed, right, by what they have and what they know, what they understand, and how true they are to themselves and their culture and all of those things. And I wanted that for them, right? For the students that I was teaching. And then I very quickly realized I had to do that for
Yeah.
myself, right?
Yeah.
I had to decolonize before I could be a really solid, culturally responsive teacher. And it's so interesting. I tell people this story all the time, like that whole transition process, right? For me being like super colonized Ariel
Mhm.
with the relaxed hair and everything to who I am today, right? It was showing up in my teaching, but you
Yeah.
could tell that it was like a process, right? So I'll never forget. I had this class of kids that I taught, and they went on to the next grade level to the next teacher. And she came in one day, and I don't even remember what she had been teaching them, but she told a story about what happened, and she was your kids are black. she's like, you made those children black. She's like, they're a Nubiac, but they think that they're black. And
Mhm.
I was like, I was really focusing on culture, but maybe I was focusing on my culture
Mine,
instead
not theirs.
right, instead of their culture. And so now just trying to kind of balance that out. I'm in Ukiyavik now, and so we do have a very multicultural town and school and all of that here. So we were actually just talking about this today. I have several students who are multiracial, and we watched this poem that a Samoan woman, it was like a slam poem, but it was a Where I'm From poem, right? And so,
Mhm.
and we had already talked about like dualities,
Yeah.
and so she's kind of talking about the duality of being multiracial. And this little kid, he was like, he's actually black and Mexican.
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, I have this duality in me. I've got this struggle because next week we have dress up days, right?
Yeah.
And like on the heels of Halloween, we have dress up days. And one of the days is like dress up as your culture,
Yep.
right? And he was like, I don't know. He was,
Mhm.
am I gonna, his dad is Nigerian. And he
Mhm.
was like, am I gonna dress, like a Nigerian person? Like what my dad would dress like? Or am I
Mhm.
gonna dress Mexican like my
Yep.
mom would dress like? And
Yep.
he's like, I have a struggle. I don't know, right? What to do or whatever. And so anyway, there's just this like this confluence
Yeah.
of all types of people and from all walks of life. And it's just beautiful. I just think it's really, really beautiful. And it comes together here, I think, um, in ways that maybe in other parts of the country there would be more strife if you had all of these people. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. I do.
All of these people together in one place, but
Yeah. And imagine
I
the
can feel that.
yeah, well, I imagine the isolation also is like, well, we gotta get there is a kind of like, we have to figure out a way, this is the community. Do you know what I mean? We're not in a city. Do you know what I mean? It's just different. It's like
Right.
we're
Yeah.
alone. We have to find a way, right?
And it's also freezing cold outside.
Also freezing
And
all the
well, I mean, like survival takes precedence over everything, right? In a place like this.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I can't tell you, like, there have been multiple occasions when I have been like walking down the road in the middle of a blizzard and some rando picks me up and I'm like, hey, and it's not a big deal. Whereas somewhere else you'd be like, I'm going to be murdered now, but no, you're not.
No, you're
So,
not.
like, they're trying to get you out of the blizzard
They
because they know
literally
you're
want you to be warm. Yes, this
right.
person wants to take care of you.
Exactly. So I think, I think it's that, but I also think back to Anubiak people and, and the idea that they are, their name, their
Yeah.
tribe literally means the real people. I think that there is something that is inclusive
Yeah.
about their culture and something that, I don't know, is just accepting and embracing and loving of other people. So I think, I don't
Yeah.
know,
I'm
it's
really
valued.
happy for you. And I also enjoy that the first half of this episode is basically a pitch for coming to teach in rural Alaska because
Listen,
I'm
people,
I
I
know
think
people who've wanted
all
to come join
over,
you. I know you're just a magnet and you're gonna attract us all. We're just gonna
right?
be
We
there.
need
It's gonna
you
be amazing.
here,
Yeah.
especially the people who'd be listening to your podcast. We 100% need
We
you
need
here.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's go to Alaska. Okay, on that note, if you had a motto for our current state of education, what would it be? Or where we're at right now?
I think I'm gonna go with make it work.
Wow.
Right?
I like how you're bringing that back.
I love Project Runway.
I
Bring back
did love
Project Runway.
it was great. There was a moment where it was a really great show. Yeah, make it work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that being back in the classroom this year, um, it's like, yes, we have science of rating laws in Alaska, and so we're required to
Mhm,
teach out of we choose
mhm,
from curriculum that the state
mhm,
has chosen. And so our school district has made its choice.
mhm.
And, it's like, well,
Yep, yep,
and
yep.
I'm like, no,
Mhm,
make it work.
mhm,
Right. And
mhm.
so that's what I have chosen to do
Yep,
in my classroom and with my students. And I have to tell you, like,
yep.
we not too long ago finished a unit on the Middle Ages. And they were like, why is it over?
Mm, that's cool.
They're like, can we keep studying the Middle Ages? And I'm like, I am such a good actress that they actually thought that that was fun. Because,
Well, but this is what I was gonna say because you say make it work, which I'm down. I like that motto a lot. I think that's so much of teaching, right? Is being like, well,
yes.
this isn't ideal. Do you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
isn't what I need to reach the hopes and dreams that I had for me and my students. And yet you have to then close that gap, right? And do the work. But like what I know about you, right, is that make it work for you didn't mean, well, gotta just open up to page one and do what the curriculum says I gotta do every
Yes.
day. So like unpack that a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Because like make it work is one thing, but I think for a lot of people who are overwhelmed, right, over capacity, I'm not saying this is a value judgment. I think teachers are working
Right.
incredibly hard and are just like, okay, if you say I got to do this, I'll just do this and just do it the way it's written. But make it work means also working it.
Yes, I like that. Work it.
Work
I
it.
feel like
I know we have a theme now. We have
make
a
it
theme now.
work,
Good.
work it. I feel like that all goes with
I'm
Project
not a
Run.
very good fashion sort of mapping person,
But
but yes.
but yes, like, so for example, I think for okay, so
Yeah.
one thing, so we're teaching CKLA. I'll just put that out on the table, right? And so one of the
Wait,
things
what are you
is
teaching? I missed that.
CKLA, that's what we're teaching. Core Knowledge Language Arts.
Got it. Thank you. I did not know that acronym. Thank you. Got it.
You're welcome.
Good.
So that's what our district chose. That's what we're teaching. And there is a background knowledge gap,
Yep.
right, for our kids. And there is, if you look through, depending on what lens you're looking through, there's a cultural relevance issue, right? And there's also a lot of really dense informational text, and that, and then you have predominantly we have striving readers, right?
You know who says something really nice? It's Colin Cruz always talks about like that you can phrase it as like we have a lot of students who are working on blank. Do you know what I mean? Or like a lot of
Right,
students who
yes,
like, and
we
I like that
have
phrasing, right? Because
gotcha.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're trying to avoid, and it's one of my
Yes, we have striving readers, and I will say I don't necessarily believe it has. Not necessarily. I don't believe it's the children, right? I do not believe it's the children. I believe it's the instruction. But anyway, I said, okay, we're gonna do this medieval unit because that's what we have to do. Well, if we're gonna do a medieval unit, then our classroom is gonna be a castle.
there.
Right. And so we
Mhm.
turned the whole we turned the whole classroom into a castle. Candles,
Oh
the
my god.
music, the whole thing, right? Just like provisioning the classroom so that it felt like, right? And so right now we're in a poetry unit, and so our classroom is it's a cafe,
Oh,
right? And so we've got little twinkling lights at our tables, and there's like a little awning outside our classroom door, and we snap, and you know, the whole thing. And I think that's part of it, right? It's just provisioning the environment, right?
huge part of it. Huge part of it.
Right. If we could just set
Yeah.
the stage and like
Yeah.
create the environment that is motivational, that is comfortable, that
Exciting.
is right.
Exciting. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
exactly. And then I also think we have to create an intellectual environment, so to speak, so that, like, what does scaffolding that gets kids excited and interested? So there was this one time I lived in Bed-Stuy in New York. So I took the A train to Nostrand Avenue. I lived right on Nostrand Avenue.
yep.
And so
Sorry you had to be on
every
the A train.
day for like over a year, right? I get off the train and I walk by all the scaffolding, right? I'm like, oh, scaffolding. Every day for like over a year. And then one day I get off the train and I walk down the street and I'm like, did I get off at the right stop? Because I've been known to like days
Sure.
and maybe get off at the wrong stop or whatever. And I'm like, did I get off at the right stop? And I look around and I'm like, yeah, I'm on my street. And then I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh my gosh, the scaffolding is gone. That building is so beautiful. I had no idea what
Yeah.
was behind there for
Mhm.
over a year because there was this hideously ugly scaffolding. I didn't know where we were going. And when we got there, I was like, I had no idea that it was like this. I'm so excited to see this beauty. I wish I would have known that this beautiful building was here the entire time. And I think we do that to kids, right? We put this ugly, hideous scaffolding in front of them, and they have no idea whatsoever what is on the other side and that it's beautiful. And
That's
that once the scaffolding is removed, they're walking into beauty, right? The beauty of being literate, the beauty of picking up a book, whatever it is, and knowing what to do. Like, I don't know about this. I better look in the glossary, or I don't know about this. I better do some background research, or, whatever. Like the
yeah.
scaffolding, we have to let kids know
Mhm.
where we're going,
Mhm.
right? And so, um, I think part of that for me this year has been so much about immersion,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so, not like explicitly saying, I'm going to immerse you in such and such because such and such, but just
Right.
like before, like we've been reading poetry all year
Mhm.
and now we're in the poetry unit and they're like, oh, right? Because we
Yeah.
have to create schema for
Yep.
kids, right? And so as we're heading into this very dense
Yep.
nonfiction unit of study about medieval times,
Yep.
I'm like, oh, there's a Magic Treehouse graphic novel
There is
about medieval times. And they were
mhm.
like all excited, right?
Yeah.
And they learned so much vocabulary
So
from
much.
that graphic novel. And they wouldn't let me, like every day, they're like, don't stop reading. I'm like, we're at the end of the chapter and we have to go to lunch. They're like, no, no, no. I'm like, yeah, we got to go. I mean, they were just on the edge, right, of their seats, right? Oh, not a cliffhanger, Miss Ariel, no cliffhangers. Because they know,
Yep.
right, what's on the other side is beautiful, and because the scaffolding itself is beautiful. It's not an eyesore, right? The
That's
scaffolding is a
that's
graphic novel that you're totally going to
yeah.
get into
Exactly right. Wow.
for
Kate.
or the scaffolding is, oh, we're going to read Love That Dog because we know we have a lot of boys in our class and they may not be digging the poetry thing, but if we read Love That Dog, right,
Yeah.
we can shift that way of thinking. And now my boys are like, they're like, oh yeah, poetry this, poetry that. And so yeah, anyway,
Yeah,
I just think that
I love that.
making it work looks for me
Yep,
like making it beautiful, like making it accessible,
yep.
making without making it easy,
Mhm.
right? We don't want to do that. So
Or
making
too
it
clean. I
accessible.
think sometimes with the scaffolds, like, I'm guilty of this plenty of times, right? Where it's like I scaffold into this, like, orderly, neat, controlled, clean, done, finished. Do you know what I mean? And it's like that I need that. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes I feel like so much of teaching is figuring out if I'm too far at in control or too far in chaos. And, like, I wanna be somewhere in the middle there, right? And so, like, the idea of
Yes.
scaffolding is great, it's helpful, but it can get me in that control place, and it can allow me
Right.
not to let kids be in the chaos of reading and thinking and writing and talking and living.
Yes, 100% yes.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
I think that, yeah, I think that's so important that we allow kids to make a mess. And sometimes I have to tell myself,
Mhm.
it's a mess and let it be a mess because we're going to teach into this.
Right.
I had a friend the other day, she's like writing this book, and I'm like, right on the inside, I'm
Mhm.
shaking because it's such a mess. And then I'm like, it's okay. It's
Great.
okay, Ariel, because we're going to teach into this. And the next book she writes is going to
Yep,
be
yep.
even less of a mess, right? She's going to get stronger and stronger and better and better. And I think that so often, I think that we're not willing to let kids make a mess because we feel like that's a reflection on
That's
us
right,
and that's a reflection on our teaching,
that's right.
as opposed to actually that's a beautiful reflection that I let kids make a mess, and then that we see the trajectory, right, of
Mhm.
increasingly less hot messness, right?
Yeah.
We go from a hot mess to a cool mess, and
Cool, man.
then and then
Yeah,
eventually it looks like we want it, like we wanted it to look from the beginning.
yeah,
But when you think about something like writing,
yep.
kids are not ever going to get better at writing if we don't let them make a mess
That's it.
because we're making all the choices for them. They'll never be able to do it with increasing independence
Yep,
and increasing skill unless we allow them to try out and do the things that we're teaching them and they make a mess of it. And then we go, okay, this is where they are. And we teach into that and we teach
yep,
into that and we teach into that. And then they get better and better.
yep.
I think that's why so many kids don't do
100%. They don't have enough
things,
practice.
whatever it is, reading, writing, math,
Yeah, yeah,
science, whatever it is, don't do things
yep.
well. And we complain that they don't do things well and that we have to give them directions for everything. Well, it's because you
Why
keep
you
giving
giving
them
them directions
directions
for
for
everything?
everything.
Exactly. I'm like, they're like, "They're
Mhm.
not independent." I'm like, "Yeah, we haven't given them the chance to be independent. They're just
Right.
totally dependent on
Make
us
terrible
every
choices.
step of the day. We're like, 'Do it this way, not like that. Do it like this. Here's your model. Here's your question. Here's your box.'"
Right, they make terrible choices because, oh, well, did you give them the opportunity, right, to make choices? And so, like, I picked my kids up from music the other day, and the music teacher was like, "I just want to give your class a compliment." He said, "You don't have a line order." He's, but they line up nicely and like
Oh,
don't run
that's
out over each other
impressive.
and da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I can't have that level of control. Line order? What? Okay,
Yeah.
that's just not me. I'm not knocking anybody who does it, but that's not like I cannot have that much control
No,
over
I'm a
something
very type
like
B teacher. I'm a
like
very
you need
type
to
B.
be your number 2. And I don't number children either. I actually
Yeah.
do have problems with that, like
Yeah.
that as a person. But anyway, and I was like, well, they do that well because I let them do it.
Right.
Like they weren't good at it at first,
Right.
and what is our motto? It's not Black Friday, and I'm not allowing you to grow up to be the kind of person who's going to run over somebody so you can
Glad
get
to
a
agree.
TV. I said, I don't want to see you on TV on Black
No,
Friday, 10 or
no,
15 years from now because you killed somebody's,
that's right.
stamping them down trying to get
Yeah,
a television. We don't
yeah.
do that in here.
No, no, we're
And
understanding
so
that. Yep.
And that's what they like, they say that to each other if someone does, like, get a little
It's not Black
wild
Friday.
when they when he tries to run by, say, "It's not Black Friday in here." That's what
Oh, that's hilarious. That's
I'm
hilarious.
like, "Exactly, it's not." So we're not, but anyway, but yeah, if we don't allow, my kids sit wherever they wanna sit, they line up however they wanna line up. Do I have structure and expectations and rules and all of those things? Of course I do. 100% yes. But also, if we don't give children the space and the opportunity to make choices, to make mistakes, to take risks, to do, what Colleen talks about in Risk, Fail, Rise. Did I say that in order?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
It's yep,
I love that book so much.
so much.
Yeah, if we're not actually doing that for children, then we're setting them up to not be able to make choices, to whether they're behavioral choices or academic choices or whatever it is. We're not setting If you don't make choices, then you don't learn how to make choices. And in a safe and secure environment where if you fail, your life is not over and I'm going to take care of you and we're going to figure out how to do it differently next time. If you fail in that right context versus the first time you make a choice, there's nothing there, there's no guardrails, right? There's nothing there to help you get back up and help you make the right choices, then you are going to be in danger then,
Yep,
right? You are going to be in trouble. And I think that that is so critical, so important. I've seen, I'll say, in rural Alaska, a number of students go off to college and they come back right away because it's the first opportunity they've had to be in an environment where they can make a lot of choices. And a lot of those choices might not be the most ideal choices that they can make. And there's nothing there, right? They think, oh, well, I failed, so I'm a complete failure. It's like you were never given the opportunity to fail. I'm talking about at school, right? You were never given the opportunity to make choices and to fail at school. And we so heavily scaffold kids that we don't prepare them, right, to go someplace else like college,
yep,
right?
yep,
And fail a quiz
mhm,
or
I
a couple of tests or whatever, to fail and then go, I can get back up again, right?
mhm,
I don't have to go home. My college career is not over. I
mhm,
made a mistake,
yep,
and because and I can outgrow myself and I can
yeah,
overcome this mistake. That's what kids who've been allowed to make choices,
yep,
A, they might make better choices to begin with, and B, even if they don't make better choices they know making a few bad choices not the end of their existence, not
that's
the
right.
end of their college career, not the end of their job, whatever, right? Whatever it happens to be that they choose to go into. And so I just think it's so
Mm,
critical in our schools that we're allowing children to
mhm.
make choices so that they have the opportunity to make mistakes.
Alright, so we're gonna say make it work and make a mess.
Make it
The
work, make a
make it
mess. I
work
like
and
it.
make a mess
That
is what I like.
works.
Alright, our final question is why do you think it's still important for kids to independently read?
I mean, come
And
on.
I say that, I ask that question partly because, what I see, I don't know if you see it, not in your school, obviously, not in your classroom, but in your work with others, is just that that act of reading seems to be under a kind of threat right now. Do you know what I mean? Or it's a
Oh,
continued
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely think that's true. I mean, first of all, like just from, I'm not saying this is first in my mind in terms of priorities, but I think just from an instructional
threat.
perspective, if kids are not reading independently, then A, they're not growing as readers. And B, they're not practicing the skills that we're teaching them. C, they're not transferring things that we're teaching them from one text to another, right? And so it's like from an even just an academic perspective, even if you only care about test scores,
Well, here's the I love that you said that
if
first.
that's the stick, right?
Exactly,
If that's what you're down with, there's still no reason, right, to
right.
not allow children to read independently and to make choices about what they're reading. They're going to be better at that thing that you care about. So let's erase all that and say,
Yep,
okay, we don't care about that. Well, my goodness, how can you I don't understand, how could you function
right.
as a human being in society, a certain type of human being, right? Who's constantly outgrowing yourself, who is making choices in the world, who is influencing people in the world, who is a change maker, who is a good parent, who is like everything that a person can
Mhm.
be improved by reading,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, there was a time here when I did a stint in middle school in this community, and same thing, teacher shortage situation. And they were like, get in there. I was the literacy coach here then. And, I had kids who were like, oh my goodness, you throw out the snow machine manuals, you throw out,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fishing magazines, the ammo magazine, like all of those. And they're like, oh, yeah, right? Because you can become a better hunter, you can become a better snow machiner, you can become a better anything. And you can do that with independence,
With
right?
independent.
Not being dependent
Don't
upon other
wait for
people.
someone to get. Yep.
Exactly. If you can read and you can do it with comprehension, you can do it with power, and you put yourself in a position, right, of influence. I just truly believe that literacy is liberation, right? Literacy is freedom. Literacy
Also a
is
great book by
liberty.
Dr. Kim
And all
Parker.
you have to go to, right, to know that that is true is look at what people who try to control other people don't allow them to do,
Yep.
right? Don't want them. If you are not wanting somebody to be free, if you are not wanting somebody to change the status quo, then you don't teach them how to read.
That's
You
right.
don't allow them to have access to books. You don't, right? I mean, that's like, let's just look at history and
Yeah.
analyze that. And that's exactly in any instance
That's it.
where one group of people are trying to have power and control over another group of people, we're always going to try to control
That's
literacy, language, right? All of those things. Because if you can control that, then you control the mind,
Yep.
right?
Yep. That's exactly it. I love that. Well, I think that's a good place to end. I could talk to you. This could be like a 3-hour podcast, Ariel. I think we could do
I
all
don't
5
think anybody would
questions.
listen to it.
I mean, maybe they, I
Really?
don't
I don't think
know.
people
I don't
listen.
know. I don't know. I think you're very charming. I'm just
Well, thank you.
3 hours. I really appreciate you showing up and your work in general. And I know I didn't say it on the recording here, but you're developing a laboratory classroom up in Alaska. So there is the possibility for people to go see what you're talking about
Well,
up there.
they could. They want to fly all the way up
I'm just
here.
saying. I'm just saying it's possible. What a
If
fun
they're
trip.
teachers, they can stay.
I
We have
love.
a job for you.
That's it. That's it. So if you want to change your life and maybe even have a better one, hit up
Absolutely.
Aeriale Johnson, teacher extraordinaire. Thank you so much. It was good to see you.
Thank you so much, Kate.